What's going on, YouTube? Good morning. My name is Colin Still, local real estate agent here in DFW. And today I wanted to talk about an investment strategy that a lot of the higher level real estate investors are practicing that regular people do not know about. I'll try to keep it pretty short and concise. So this is a very strategic investor practice that I see a lot of these guys do. One of my old mentors who owned about 58 doors here in DFW, like regular, just 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes, not like apartments or anything like that. Just regular 3-bed, 2-bath residential homes, right? I think he had about 58 of them. He had started with, one and scaled up, right? And they're playing with debt, okay? And so this is really important because I would watch this guy sometimes, or I would say consistently every year, not pay taxes on somewhere between $500,000 to well over $1 million in income. And he would not pay any taxes. And it was because it was debt. Very Robert Kiyosaki, right? So let me explain how he would do this. So, him and his wife, they accrued these properties. And so, you're holding these rental properties and you're getting a tenant in there and then you're just maintaining it, right? So, the rental income goes into an account, goes into like an LLC account, a business account, whatever, right? And you don't touch that money, all right? Because once you touch that money, it's profit. You got to pay taxes, okay? So you use that money to maintain the business, which you can then write those things off, right? Like, the AC units, new windows, garage door opener, whatever, right? Those things are maintenance and can be written off potentially. Obviously, I'm not an accountant. This is not legal advice. So then what you do is you basically, after time, right, you have a loan on the property, right? I'm going to assume you're just a regular person. You're not paying cash. So, you buy a $200,000 or $300,000 home and, that's what you owe. You owe, $320,000, $330,000, $340,000, right? And as your tenants are paying your rent that you're using to maintain the property and service the mortgage, eventually what happens is and then every year the value of the property is going to go up, right? So as your property value goes up and the money you owe on the mortgage goes down, eventually you get this gap, right? You get this margin. And so that's when a lot of these guys will do a cash out refinance and they'll pull out equity. And so I would see this guy, they have so many properties every year, 3 to 5 properties. They basically have a spreadsheet, right? And once they hit enough equity, whatever they've decided they want to see, let's say it's 40, 50% equity or something, right? So for example, let's say they owe $200,000, but now the property, and they originally bought the property for $250,000, but now the property's worth, $350,000. And they only owe $200,000. So they have $150,000 in positive equity. They owe $200,000, it's worth $350,000. And this is way easier than selling or liquidating a home because you don't have to worry about the market as much, right? About what people are willing to pay, right? You just have to get an appraisal. And appraisers are usually, a far more, they'll work with you, right? They know that there's a deal and the financing is requiring the appraisal, right? So I rarely have major issues with appraisal as long as you're not being absolutely ridiculous. If you're not a realistic person, you should hit up someone like me, an agent, pull CMAs, and I'll give you a good idea of what it's going to appraise for. Anyway, so this is the craziest part. I mean, this dude would refinance, 3 to 5 of these properties every year, which would end up, he's pulling out equity, right? So you pay off the old loan. I'm going to use the exact example, right? So you pay off the $200,000 and you can pull up, you have to leave at least 20% equity in the property, typically. So then you can pull out as much equity as you want of the rest. And so, I would see him pull out $100,000 from this home, $200,000 from this home, and it would add up to, I think he did probably like 6 or 7 refinances one year, which is well over $1 million. And because it's debt, that cash out refinance that you're pulling out, that's considered debt, which you do not pay taxes on. So, I mean, he would pull out all this equity and not pay any taxes. And it's just like this like revolving thing where, right, and that's when you make your money. That's when you pay yourself, okay? You don't pay yourself with the rent blah, 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 blah. And so a lot of people do not know about this. They don't know about how to play with debt and avoid these taxes. I mean, avoiding taxes on $500,000 to $1 million is nothing to bat your eyes about. Obviously, if you're just a regular person and you're trying to like level up, you know, you're not a multimillionaire or anything like that. This is very valuable information because a lot of people don't know about this, okay? And then real estate is a really fun game because, you know, you can homestead a property as well. So you can liquidate one property every so many years that you've homesteaded, and you can not pay taxes up to $500,000 if you're married, $250,000 if you're single like me. So very good information, but the debt play is what I really want to kind of discuss about in this video, and how interesting it is and how few people know about this. And I remember just being blown away. I was like, dude, this guy just made like $500,000 to $1 million, and I was watching him do it consistently every year, and he was not paying any money, any taxes, legally, totally legal, because it's debt, and you don't pay taxes on your debt. So, you know, very interesting, very interesting. So I see a lot of high-level investment people who are their or landlords, and they have all these rental properties. That's what they do, is they roll refinances and they build up their portfolio so that they have enough houses basically coming up every year or 2 years or 3 years where they can refinance them and make a large spread of money tax-free, right? And it's like, well, Colin, you know, you're accruing all this debt. What are you gonna, it's like you, and then the game starts all over again, right? You know, you refinance it for, you know, whatever the maximum amount of, you know, you can, or maybe you leave more than 20% equity in the property, whatever, that's up to you. But my point is it's the potential to basically have some pretty nice paydays tax free, which is a awesome thing to do, and it's totally legal. You can look into this. Super interesting, and I see a lot of these guys doing it. So that's pretty much how it works. And I just remember being like, damn, this guy is making a lot of money tax free, man, you know. And the more I've worked with investors and learned from them, the more I've seen this, how common this is on real estate investing. So food for thought, something to consider if you are, you know, looking to grow money, looking to find ways to, you know, create a portfolio. If you're interested in real estate, whether you want to be able to educate people on this kind of thing, or for yourself, for your future plans, this is something important you should know about. One of the ways that real estate can be very beneficial to be able to, you know, accrue a lot of money, and again, you know, be able to take advantage of the tax laws to, in this case, not pay any taxes on this money, on this debt. So, you know, and I'll reiterate one time and then I'll wrap it up because we're about 8 minutes in. So again, you know, you have a property and your mortgage is this and the value is this, right? So eventually, you know, when you buy the property and you take out a mortgage, right, it's worth what the debt you're taking out is. And you're probably going to owe a little bit more than what it's worth at the time, right, because of interest, right? But eventually these things, what it's worth, you know, appreciates, and you're paying it down, right? If you're renting it, your tenants are paying that mortgage every month for you. And maybe you're paying, you know, additional principal payments or something, right? So your margin is widening, right? And all of this is your equity, right? And so eventually it gets to a place where, you know, there's a lot of money, right? There might be hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity now. You know, maybe you have a mortgage for $100,000 and now the property is worth $300,000. This is very realistic. I mean, it takes time. It's a slow game, right? You know, at first you're just accruing. It'll take years at first for you to kind of, you know, get to this place, but eventually you'll be there and it's like, oh man, I have like, you know, 15, 20 properties. And oh man, those 3 I bought my first, you know, 5 years when I started, those are doing pretty good. And you know, I need to make some improvements and I'd like to see a payday. And so, you know, you do that cash out refinance. And so there's a few things you can do with this cash out refinance. One, obviously, is when you pull that equity out, you can pay yourself and it's tax free. Okay. 2, you can obviously renovate the property for maintenance and improvements, right? So that you can, you know, let's say a lease ends and before you release out the property, you do a cash out refinance. And you know, you can put some of that money back for a bigger nest egg for servicing the property for the servicing the mortgage, as well as renovating that property so that when you take it back to the market, you can rent it for more because it's renovated, it's nicer. And then, man, there was one more. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much a good idea, and kind of gets my point across. So, yeah, I mean, there's a few things you can do with that money, right? Oh, okay, I remember now. And then the third thing is you take that cash out, especially when you're just getting into it, right? Like let's say you buy your first home and then you rent it out. And in a few years, you do a cash out refinance. Let's say the market goes back up and you've been paying on your mortgage and you've been making some principal payments, right? So now you do this cash out refinance and you take out, 40, 50, 60, $70,000. Well, there's your down payment for home number two and you don't have to come out of pocket, right? So you use asset number one, right? That's been appreciating while the debt's been going down that you owe, and you use that money to acquire property number two by doing the cash out refinance. So it's like this thing will eventually just pay for itself and then some and help you acquire new properties quickly, right? Rather than like, oh man, I need to like spend the next several years saving up another down payment, right? You can probably do that. You don't even have to do that because the property is going to naturally appreciate in value over time. Like they're not going to quit printing money, y'all. Inflation's not ever going to go away, right? So, the name of the game is holding assets. That's how you win in today's world. Like the value of the dollar is going to consistently go down, and inflation is going to consistently go up. So, I mean, the way to future-proof yourself against those two variables is assets. The tide is going to continue to rise, and assets are boats that float on the ocean on the tide, right? And so inflation is the tide. And then I don't know what the metaphor I'd use for money, but basically, the value of your dollar is going to go down, right? So, you want to you don't want to hold money in a savings account, savers or losers, right? You want to take that cash and you want to put it in assets so that they appreciate, so that inflation is your friend, okay? That's how the strategy. Now, I focus specifically on real estate in this video, so that's what I'm talking about. But that's the whole name of the game, okay? So, savers or losers, right? Your money is not in anything that's going to go up with inflation, and it's only going to go down, right? So inflation is killing the value of your money, as well as the overall value of the dollar is going down as well for other reasons that we're not going to get into. But that's pretty much it, right? So there you have it. So, that's the beautiful strategy that I see a lot of these high-level elite, multi-million plus investors are operating on is, especially if you're in the tenant game and the landlord game, you're renting to tenants, is a lot of these guys are acquiring these assets. And then what they do is they wait for those appreciation and the pay downs of those mortgages to create enough positive equity. And then they extract that positive equity through cash out refinances, which then that equity, that money is tax free. And then they can go do things with that money, right? They can pay themselves, one, they can renovate and improve and maintain the property and service the property, two, and then they can obviously use that money to acquire more properties, which is really important if you're just starting off, right? Like that should be your goal is, I want to basically utilize this asset, home number one, right? I want to pay down this mortgage as fast as possible. And then and then obviously you have no control over the market, but, hopefully the market does well. It will over time. Inflation is going to continue to happen. And so you watch and you're patient, and eventually that window will happen where your equity is much higher than what you owe. And then what you do is you use that money, you pull that money out with a cash out refinance, tax free. And then you take that money, right? And a down payment on a lot of these 3-bedroom, 2 baths is not as much as you think. It's like $20K or something. And so you can start acquiring a lot of these properties. Your first cash out refinance might afford you a down payment for up to 2 properties at least. And so, you can really start scaling, right? And then, a few more years go by, now you have 3 properties, they all go down, the mortgage, the debt goes down, the value goes up, and you do cash out refinance on all 3 of those, and you can go buy, let's be very reasonable and very, modest and say each cash out refinance, you take that money and go buy 1 property. Now you're at 6 properties, right? Like you're scaling quickly, right? And obviously you can do other things while you do this. This is one of those things that, it's a lot of upfront work, and then you kind of sit back and you play the waiting game. Okay, you just maintain the property. You figure out how to cheaply maintain the property and be a good landlord. Don't be a crappy landlord as best as possible. And there you go. I mean, and then you just play the waiting game. And there's other things you can do, obviously, as well. But you shouldn't just be doing this, in my opinion. I think you should be doing like, 4, 5, 6, 7 things. You should find ways to make money in all avenues and walks. But this is obviously a foolproof good way of making money. Real estate is a solid asset. And again, as I always go back to in a lot of my other videos, my goal is to help as many regular people as possible acquire real estate. And why am I so passionate about this? Because this whole you're going to own nothing and be happy mentality, all these corporations, these Chinese corporations, Vanguard, BlackRock, that are buying up houses and then renting them out, right? You're going to blink, and in 5, 10, 15 years, there's not going to be very many houses, right? Like all these companies are going to own all these apartments and houses, and you're not going to have any other option but to rent, right? So I want to help as many regular people. Obviously, I'll work with anybody, but I want to help as many regular people accrue real estate so that you are protected from this kind of coming ensuing storm from the free market and all of these different things where all these big companies are allowed to just buy up all of these houses, these regular houses. And so regular people are gonna be stuck holding, man. They're gonna find out the hard way in a few years that it's much harder to acquire a home. And once there is no option to go buy a home, or it's so hard to buy a home, people are priced out, right? They have no other choice but to rent, which means you don't have very much negotiating power, right? It's like literally whatever these guys set the price is what they expect you to pay. And they're gonna bleed you out, man, because they know you're not gonna have any negotiating power, right? You have no other choice but to go rent somewhere. And once we get to that point, it's gonna be very, very tough on people. There's gonna be a lot of people who are screwed, who don't have much option or choice or flexibility, right? So, if I can help as many regular people as possible get real estate now, right? That's going to create a lot of buffer and protection for normal people to avoid that scenario of being in that boat, where you're stuck and you're screwed, and it's like there's just this big monopoly of apartments owned by these big companies, and you got to go rent from one of them. And so they're setting the price. There is no negotiating. So that's my 2 cents on this. I hope y'all found this valuable. And again, this was a really interesting way of basically making money with real estate and potentially making a lot of money tax-free and not paying taxes on that money. So hope you found this interesting. If you have any questions, please comment below. I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Love y'all. Stay blessed, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.